Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about the complete story of Rogue and Gambit miniseries, written by Stephanie Phillips. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment to help the channel grow. So with that said, this issue opens with a drunken Gambit backed against the wall trying to talk his way out of trouble, suggesting that maybe they can solve this problem over a game of cards, ranging anywhere from blackjack to crazy eights. But to nobody's surprise, no one was taking him up on his offer, because the people who were surrounding him were a part of the Thieves' Guild, and they were not about to settle this peacefully by no means, because almost immediately they began to beat the crap out of Gambit. Now usually, this wouldn't be a problem for him, but due to him being wasted, things aren't exactly going his way, until a certain someone arrives on the scene. His ace in the hole, the beautiful and powerful Rogue. And by the looks of it, she is not happy by no means, because the first thing she points out upon getting there was that he was drunk, which he couldn't deny because it was written all over his face. So immediately, Gambit tried to push it all under the rug by blaming this whole thing on a misunderstanding. But despite there being more to the story, his wife, Rogue, didn't push the issue too much given the fact that they both have things going on in their lives, because she ends the conversation by stating they would pick this talk up later. And with those words, Gambit replied by almost throwing up in Rogue's face. So following that, we transition to a police transport in upstate New York 3 days prior. And the person that was being transported was a deadly mutant by the name of Lady Deathstrike. And by the looks of it, she was completely locked down with no way to escape, until a barrage of bullets sprayed the driver of said transport. So with the driver out of the picture, an unknown object hits the top of the vehicle, which prompts the police to ready their weapons. But to everyone's surprise, the armored vehicle doors were ripped off the back of the escort, leaving them exposed to whoever was attacking. So in a last-ditch effort, the police opened fire, but to no success, because out of nowhere an electric bass attack filled the cabin, which took them all out, leaving only Lady Deathstrike standing, because whoever attacked this escort was focused on getting her. So following that, we skip over to the current day, where we see a hungover Gambit laying in his bed completely out of commission as Rogue lay into him, saying how she was looking everywhere for him because they agreed to meet each other in Lafayette's, but instead, she found him in a back alley fighting assassins completely drunk. And the crazy part about this whole thing was that this was supposed to be their first vacation since she left the X-Men, and she was trying to use this opportunity to reconnect with her love, but instead, she is left babysitting him. But that was when Destiny arrived inside their bedroom, saying that she tried warning Rogue about Gambit, because let's just say that Destiny doesn't look too highly upon Gambit as a person. But to her defense, Gambit really doesn't like her either. So getting back to the story, Rogue asked her adopted mother if something had happened, which Destiny responded by saying, no, but in time something will. Which Gambit quickly lets it be known that he could care less about what Destiny saw by calling her Nostradamus. So in an attempt to ignore our friendly neighborhood Cajun, Destiny states, while I have no qualms about interrupting your time with my daughter, I would not have come if it wasn't important. Now, knowing how powerful Destiny foresight is, Rogue tells her to talk. But unfortunately, Destiny tells her that she needs Rogue to just trust her and find an Omega-class teleporter mutant by the name Manifold. The same Manifold that used to work with the Avengers, Sword, and Cable. So with that said, Destiny goes on to say that Rogue is the only person she could trust with this information, because eventually, a time will come when they will need Manifold's help. Following that, Gambit calls for a timeout as he questions what Destiny is saying, because how could they trust her if she won't even tell them her vision? Which causes Rogue to stand in agreement with Gambit and say, Gambit does have a point, you didn't really give us much information to go off of. So in a final attempt to gain their help, Destiny asks Rogue to put all her trust she has into her for this one time, which Rogue eventually gives in and replies with, where would they even find Manifold in the first place? So Destiny responds by saying, I could tell you where, but it would be your job to convince him by any means necessary, because Manifold would not blindly follow Krakoa's authority. He may assist Sword when called upon, but he follows his own agenda, and there's a very good chance he does not come willingly. So just as she said that, we skip over to Nevada where we see Manifold laughing his butt off, saying this has to be the best joke he has heard in ages. Now, Rogue understands his unwillingness to help, given everything Abigail did back in X-Men Red when she tried to start an intergalactic war. But she lets him know that this isn't about Krakoan politics. But no matter what Rogue says, Manifold still won't help given the fact that there was no information to go off of. Especially because he has his own thing going on right now. Now, Manifold states that people with powers are going missing. Primarily villains are taken from prisons and government facilities. And as for Lady Deathstrike, she was their most recent captive. But luckily for Manifold, his surveillance was able to track her to Nevada and tie her to a flight on a private jet. Now, this private jet just so happens to belong to Rebin Brousseau, the British ambassador. And it just so happens that his flight is due to land this evening. So with that information, Rogue suggests a trade. They assist Manifold, and then Manifold goes along with them when all is said and done, which he kind of takes them up on their deal. So with that established, we hop over to the outside of Vegas where we see the private jet land. And out for the plane walks the ambassador of Britain as he is met by several people with suits. And among this lot is a masked Lady Deathstrike with a patch on her neck. Because this shady organization is apparently selling her off to this individual for some unknown reason. But before the buy could go through, the ambassador asked to see what he is buying. So before she could give a demonstration, Gambit's card came flying out of nowhere, knocking the remote out of her hand. And just like that, Manifold, Gambit, and Rogue arrive on the scene. And without any hesitation, our hero began to put in work on the suited individual as the ambassador hops back on his jet and begins to order the pilot to take off. But just as he attempts to leave, Rogue yells out for someone to stop him. But before anyone could, a woman in glasses pulls out a device and hits our hero with it. Now, this device seems to have stripped them of their mutant abilities, leaving them defenseless. So as the suited individuals began to shoot, Manifold mustered up all his remaining power to teleport Rogue and Gambit to safety before collapsing onto the floor. So as Manifold sat powerless and drained on the runway, the suited individuals surrounded him with their weapons at the ready, as the woman with the glasses placed a patch on his neck. So with Manifold captured, this issue comes to an end. So with issue number 1 coming to an end, we transition over to issue number 2. So this issue opens up with a powerless Gambit and Rogue both stranded in the vast hot desert of Nevada. And when we see them, apparently they have been walking for some time without water or any other means of communication. So with the heat getting to my boy Gambit's head, he makes a comment about how Manifold could have teleported them to a place with a bit of more shade. Which Rogue replied to that comment by saying, next time she'll make sure she tells Manifold to teleport them out of a life or death situation to somewhere more agreeable to Gambit, while sacrificing himself to save them. Now, with Rogue putting Gambit in his place, she goes to explain how their first order of business is to find civilization soon while they wait for their power to return. Because her goal is still to do what Destiny asked. Which threw Gambit completely off, because due to current events, he just wanted to cut their losses and return home and inform the council of what just happened. Now this wasn't something Rogue was about to do. Given the fact that A, they owe Manifold for saving their lives, and she wasn't about to abandon him like that, and B, she swore to Destiny that she will carry this out without telling anyone. So with the temperature rising between the two, Gambit caught hold of Rogue's hand and quickly realized that due to their powers acting up, they are now safely able to touch. So with Gambit not being the one to waste a good opportunity, he seized the moment and shared a passionate kiss with his love Rogue. So as the two share a moment together, we skip over to someone not as fortunate. For Manifold awakes in a daze as he hears a voice from a mysterious man talking about how incredible his ability is. For this stranger continues to say some will call it power, but abilities and powers aren't the same thing. Because one can have abilities and not have power. So with that said, Manifold sat up in a bed in shock as he finds himself in an all-white cell. So the first thing he did was immediately check his neck, because before he was captured his jailer attached a device to him that apparently suppressed his abilities because he wasn't able to escape via teleportation. So with Manifold coming to the realization that he is trapped, he turned and demanded the stranger in the suit to let him go. But with him being completely powerless, the mystery man clicks a button which darkens the glass as he walked away. And as he leaves, he finishes his dialogue by saying, "What could possess Rogue and Gambit to want you? Because that's where your true power lies, as well as the price on his head." So with that said, Manifold was left to contemplate his life choices as we skip back over to Rogue and Gambit. For our two heroes found themselves in a small western town 50 miles from Las Vegas. And on top of that, some small portion of their mutant abilities have returned, for Gambit was now able to manifest a hint of his powers. So with things starting to look up for them, the two make their way into a saloon, and upon entering the establishment, the room grew completely silent as all eyes locked on them. Now, trying not to cause any trouble, both Gambit and Rogue navigated their way through the tables and up to the bar. And upon getting there, Gambit requested some water. So with everything going well, a man at the edge of the bar calls out to our heroes and said that he knows them. And to their surprise, the stranger was happy to see them, for he recognized them from watching them save the world. Now with everything going well, the locals and Gambit danced the day away, as Rogue insisted that they needed to get going. But with the music pumping, Remy once again couldn't help but try to steal one last dance before they hit the road. But unfortunately, the dance he wanted was not going to be with Rogue, for in the corner of the bar the Black Panther arrived on the scene. And by the looks of it, he was not happy. For he tells Gambit and Rogue to accompany him to answer for their crimes. For the Black Panther is under the impression that they are responsible for the disappearance of an Avenger by the name Manifold. Because apparently, the Black Panther had received a call from Manifold prior to them going out on their mission. And during that call, he told the Black Panther that they requested him to come with them to Krakoa at the behest of Destiny. And that he refused and they didn't want to accept it. And on a side note, the Black Panther brings up the time Storm stole the sword in issue number 13 of the Marauders. But anyway, getting back to the story, a fight breaks out as some of the locals start to attack the Black Panther. So just like that, the fight was on, as the Black Panther, in my opinion, beat the crap out of a depowered Gambit. But let's be honest, even if Gambit was fully charged, the Black Panther would still be more than he could handle. Because Gambit even knew to put respect on the Black Panther's name as the beating continued. So in an attempt to help her husband, a slightly weakened Rogue punched the heck out of the Black Panther. Because one has to remember that in strength alone, a slightly depowered Rogue is still super strong. So while Rogue is busy holding off the Black Panther, Gambit sees an opportunity to escape. Because in a dirty trick, Gambit grabbed and tied up the bartender next to a burning gas stove in hopes that the Black Panther would stop to help. So with the innocent woman calling for help, Gambit grabbed his wife and ran for the door, as the Black Panther was forced to save the woman. So once the two exited the bar, Rogue confronted Gambit about the stunt he just pulled inside, for he endangered the innocent woman's life for selfish reasons. In which Gambit responds by saying the Black Panther is a hero, so, of course, he will save her. So with Rogue trusting Gambit, she takes the keys to the bike and races away from the now-destroyed bar. So with some distance between themselves and the Black Panther, Rogue is now more determined to find Manifold than ever. Because not only does she owe him and promise Destiny, but now she has the Black Panther to worry about. So with the hunt on, Gambit asked, how does she propose they go about tracking down missing mutants while an Avenger is on their tail? Which Rogue answers by saying, this situation is beyond them to handle alone, but with the right technology, they could pull it off. And on the final page, we see both Rogue and Gambit meeting up with Forge. For if any mutant has a tool they can use to track down Manifold, then he would be the guy. And with that said, issue number 2 of Rogue and Gambit comes to an end. So following the events of issue number 2, we transition over to issue number 3. So with that said, this issue opens in New York City with Mystique finally catching up with Destiny, because in the previous 2 issues we find out through the data pages that Destiny has been avoiding her for some reason. Now the reason she gives on this page was that she needed to be alone to make sense of her visions of this impending doom. Because according to her, if Rogue and Gambit failed to deliver Manifold to a certain place, then everything they built would be lost. So as of right now, Manifold importance hasn't been uncovered as of yet, but 9 times out of 10 it would have something to do with his Omega level teleportation. But anyway, getting back to the story, we shift over to Forge's workshop in the X-Men treehouse, because in the last issue, after their run-in with the Black Panther, Rogue brings up how she needed Forge's help to track down Manifold. So upon arriving at the lab, Gambit's attention was drawn to 4 silver spheres situated on a nearby table. He gazes at them intently, clearly intrigued by their presence. But with him being driven by his inquisitive nature, he starts to extend his hand towards them. However, before he can make contact, Forge intervenes, quickly grabbing his wrist to stop him in his tracks. For Forge goes on to caution him by saying there are many dangerous items scattered about the lab, including the silver spheres that are actually explosives capable of detonating at the slightest touch. So with that said, Gambit quickly breathed a sigh of relief upon realizing he had narrowly avoided a bad situation. However, his relief is short-lived as Rogue stares at Gambit in disapproval, with him defending his actions by pointing out that Forge was the one who carelessly left explosives lying around despite knowing that visitors would be present in the lab. After narrowly avoiding disaster, Rogue continued to ask Forge for assistance in tracking down a specific mutant. However, her request is met with disappointment as Forge declines to help, citing a lack of information on the target as well as his limited expertise in finding missing persons. Despite this setback, Rogue quickly counters with the knowledge that she had heard otherwise. And before he could double down, Rogue interrupted him and mentions a suit he had built in the past that incorporated DNA from Caliban and Mystique, which he used to save the older X-23 during the Vault Story arc. So after Rogue dropped that bombshell, Forge was taken aback as he turned to Rogue with surprise and asked if Destiny had provided her with this information. So as the two face off, we get some additional information about how Forge feels about this suit from a data page, because in this document, Forge wonders how far he strayed from doing the right thing. Because in order to attempt to save Darwin and X-23, he asked Sinister for help to create a suit using several mutants' abilities without their consent. Now in Krakoa, this is a big no-no because it is seen as a violation of someone's personal DNA. So because of that, Forge has negative feelings towards the suit, despite it being vital in saving others' lives. So with the moral issue at hand, Forge ultimately ended up destroying the suit out of guilt. So following that inner look into Forge's choice to destroy the suit, we jump several years in the past, to the Danger Room, where Rogue, fresh off of taking Captain Marvel's power, destroys the training area before running away into the woods. Now the reason why this is important is because during this time Rogue had no idea how to control the abilities she stole. So at one of her lowest moments, when she escaped into the forest, Remy was right there to comfort her. So as the two share a passionate kiss, we jump over to the current day, where both lovers was at each other's throats. For Gambit feels betrayed because the love of his life was withholding very important information from him in regard to the suit in question. But see, Rogue wasn't about to hear it, for the nature of their relationship is built upon both parties minding their own business. So with that said, Rogue claps back by saying, "I don't think you want to get into an argument about keeping secrets, Cajun," which was a reference calling back to the intro of the first issue of the series, where Gambit didn't want to talk about why he was being attacked by the ninjas in the alleyway while drunk. As Gambit and Rogue come to a standstill, Forge interjects himself in their conversation, drawing their attention toward him, because he goes on to inform them that he has already destroyed the suit that they had been discussing. So with that said, Rogue's interest was piqued, which caused all eyes to focus on Forge, as he admits that creating the suit had been a mistake from the start, and as a result, he had eradicated everything, including all the research associated with it. With little hope left, Gambit returns to the table where the silver spheres had been located and proceeds to touch one. The result is a massive explosion that obliterates the entire lab. So as the group gets back on their feet following the blast, Forge begins to erupt in anger as he berates Remy for his recklessness and orders everyone to leave his lab. In the aftermath of the massive explosion, Rogue directs her anger towards Remy, criticizing him for being unhelpful and causing problems instead of being a useful asset to their mission. And following that, she then continues to complain that she now has no choice but to locate Caliban and absorb his powers herself in order to track down Manifold. However, to her surprise, Remy is one step ahead of her, because out of nowhere, he produces a data file from his pocket, which he had managed to retrieve from Forge's lab. And the way he did it was by being astute enough to notice Forge's body language, which gave away his deception. Because whenever Rogue mentioned the suit, Forge would look towards a drawer on the side of his workbench, revealing that he was hiding something. So with him using the chaos of the explosion as cover, Remy was able to retrieve the data card without being noticed by anyone. So with the data in hand, Remy tells his love that he will be leaving the rest of this adventure to her to deal with, for he is done complaining and causing problems. So with a kiss on her forehead, Remy continues to tell her that they need to talk when all of this is over, because he understands that saving the world comes first. So as he walks away, he lets her know that she knows where to find him after she saves Manifold. Now that Rogue has the means to track Manifold, the scene shifts to a location in New Mexico where the man of the hour is being held captive in an obvious trap. So as Rogue descends down to the bottom, she comments on how she saw mousetraps more inviting than this. So once she reaches the bottom, she wastes no time in announcing her arrival and makes it clear she wants to skip the dramatic reveal and get straight to the action. In response, a voice over the intercom grants her wish as the roof above starts to close. Now with the trap sprung, the mysterious voice states that he was hoping that her husband would be joining them, but he assures her that her alone would still fetch a high price. So with that out there, the ground began to open as several prisoners emerged from the ground ready to do battle. For everyone they caught was now under the control of the mysterious man, which included Manifold himself. So with the odds stacked against her, the enemy's puppets began to attack with no mercy, which is extremely dangerous for our hero, because she wasn't trying to hurt anyone. So as the fight carries on, Rogue discovers that whoever this person was planning on selling off the mutants as weapons to the highest bidder. So in an effort to set the puppets free, Rogue grabbed the implant on the neck of the Vanisher and pulled it off, hoping it would do the trick. But in a twist of fate, Vanisher doubled over and started to cough out blood, for the implant was connected directly to the central nervous system, which means if the device is removed, then the puppet will die. So with that said, Vanisher fell dead on the floor in a pool of his own blood. So with that said, issue number 3 of Rogue and Gambit comes to an end. So with issue number 3 coming to an end, we pick up with issue number 4. Now this issue opens 3 months ago with the Juggernaut fighting against the Absorbing Man in an all-out battle. And while this is going on, we get a bit of narration stating that power is a construct, for he used to believe power could be created via serums constructed in a lab. And with those serums, extraordinary abilities could be given to humans. And while they have succeeded in testing the limits of the human body, his company has failed to consider that true power already exists. For the person behind everything is the power broker. So as he watched, he is accompanied by several individuals from all over the world, which includes Ambassador Brousseau of Britain. And by the looks of it, the ambassador wasn't trying to hear his pitch, for he heard it all before. He heard the promises of technology to level the playing field between mutants and humans. And because of that, he wasn't interested in being a part of yet another one of the power broker's failures. So with that said, the power broker does admit that not all his ventures have yielded the intended results, but at the end of the day, the ambassador is still here because he believes humanity shouldn't be left behind by mutantkind. So to demonstrate just how much control they will have over the chip mutants, he presses a single button, and instantly the Absorbing Man completely stops in his tracks and allowed the Juggernaut to beat him down. Now that was something the ambassador could get behind, for this was more than just a device that made people fight, this was a device that made people obey. So with the demonstration a success, the ambassador was completely on board with the power broker. So with that being said, we skip over to the current day with Rogue kneeling over a dead mutant, for after she removed the device, the person immediately died. So with that revelation, the massive bulb doors slid open, and out walked the power broker saying, "How, maybe she'll think twice before using brutish strength to remove pieces of technology that she doesn't comprehend." So with rage filling her heart, Rogue dashes straight toward the power broker at full speed in an attempt to end this, but before she could get there to deliver her hit, Juggernaut completely blindsided her and sent her flying to the ground. So with no time to waste, Rogue returns to her feet, for the longer she waits to deal with the power broker, the harder it would be to correct these issues. So as she gears up for round 2, out of nowhere Manifold teleported behind her and attached the device to the back of her neck, sending her crashing to the ground completely unable to move. Now with Rogue completely defenseless, the broker approached her and told her that she might feel a small pinch, but he promised it will be over quickly. So while the chip was coming online, a barrage of cards rained down from above and exploded on impact, clearing the way for Gambit to make his arrival. So with Gambit on the scene, he instantly places himself between the broker's forces and his love, Rogue, and with haste, he removed the device from her back and crushed it in his hand. But see, just because he was able to remove it, didn't mean she was free from his control, because, with a clean left jab, she punched Gambit right in the face. For the device was partially integrated with Rogue's nervous system, which means the power broker had control of her body while Rogue still had control over her speech and mind. So with Rogue partially under the power broker's control, he orders her to kill Gambit while he and his guest leave. So with the fight on, Gambit tries his best to play keep away, while Rogue body attacks without remorse. But strangely enough, the couple takes this time to speak through several issues they were facing. So with that said, Rogue started by saying that self-deprecation does not mean you're forgiven for that Cajun. In which Gambit replies by saying, "Is this the power broker fighting me, or you?" Because to Remy, that statement sounded a bit personal. So with that out there, Rogue throws yet another hook while saying defend yourself to Gambit. So in his words, he would never fight her. But see, Rogue wasn't done with the subtle attacks because she states if only you felt that way back in New Orleans, which was a reference to their argument. So with Rogue fist finding its home in Gambit's stomach, Remy refused to back down and shot back by saying he never wanted to fight her to begin with, but she never listens to him. So, with the argument intensifying, Rogue called BS and said he gotta be kidding her, for she asked him if he believes he is the only one not being listened to. So to defend his claim, Gambit states that whenever they buy new furniture or go somewhere to eat, he always let her choose. So with Rogue hitting her boiling point, she shouts out how she is getting tired of him being passive-aggressive because before, she used to catch him staring at her to the point where he couldn't take his eyes off of her. But now she doesn't even know where he is even at most of the times, even when he is sitting right next to her. And because of that, she feels as if he is keeping things from her, for she could feel since he died in Otherworld things haven't been the same. And to make things worse, he refuses to talk about it. And she is fully aware there are things they both don't say out loud, but she thought that after everything, she would be the person he trusted and loved enough to talk to instead of reaching for a bottle. Now this hit home, because the last thing Remy ever wanted is for Rogue to feel like she isn't loved. So with a mean uppercut, Rogue sent Gambit flying while the other controlled individuals began to surround them. Because Power Broker orders her to absorb everyone's powers in the room, which her body started doing without her command. So with time ticking, Rogue tells Gambit the only way to stop this is to get the remote from the Power Broker before it is too late. So with that out there, Gambit starts to make his way to the rooftop, where we see the Power Broker entering a helicopter in an attempt to escape, but before he could get far, a card ripped through the propellers, sending it crashing to the ground below. So defeated and heavily wounded, the Power Broker crawls from the wreckage in an attempt to escape, only to be met by the Cajun. And Gambit was playing no games and wanted the remote now, in exchange for not blowing off his legs. But through their interactions, he discovered even with the remote, Rogue still wouldn't be free just as long as he have the device in her head. So with that bad news, a supercharged Rogue comes crashing out of the base completely out of control. So with that said, issue number 4 of Rogue and Gambit comes to an end. Now following the events of issue number 4, we transition over to issue number 5. So this issue opens up with Rogue beating the crap out of Gambit due to the Power Broker gaining control over her body in the last issue. But no matter what attacks this supercharged Rogue dishes out, Gambit refuses to leave her side, even if it could result in death. So with Remy struggling to stay one step ahead of her, he continues to try to encourage Rogue to fight back against the Broker's control. So as he dashes towards her, she then proceeds to let out an electric attack that causes him to drop to his knees. So as the current surges through his body, Remy let it be known that she can do whatever she puts her mind to. Because she fought against the Avengers, aliens, supervillains, and even death, and at the end of the day she always won and came out on top. So as he pleaded for her to gain control over herself, she lifted him off the ground and prepared to deal the deadly blow. But even as all that was going on, he still pressed on to try to encourage her to gain control by bringing up past memories. So in a stroke of determination, she proceeds to let him go, sending him falling to the ground as she gives it her all to regain control of her body. So in an epic conclusion, the electricity stopped flowing as she dropped down in exhaustion. Quickly Gambit went to her side in order to see if she was okay, but out of nowhere, she head-butted him right in his nose. And for a brief moment, he was under the assumption that maybe his pep talk wasn't enough to motivate her breakthrough. But to his surprise, that was something Rogue wanted to do. So he replied by saying he deserved that and more. So as she went in for a kiss, the Power Broker interrupted them by saying he hoped to see her kill him because he truly disliked having to get his own hands dirty. Because the Power Broker had a contingency plan in place, which includes taking a play out of Rogue's playbook, for if you don't have power of your own, then all he has to do is borrow some. And just like that, he grew extremely huge after activating a device on his chest. So as the Power Broker geared up for his assault, Gambit stated that he liked him better before he had adamantium pumping through his veins. So before he can get off a hit, both Gambit and Rogue charge him, with Rogue going high and Gambit going low. So with the two getting the jump on the Broker, the remote was sent flying out of his pocket. So being the master thief, Gambit went straight for the remote, so he could even the odds by turning off the control of the other prisoners. But see, the Power Broker was dead set on achieving his goals, because he went straight for Remy and tried to cut him off. But before he could deliver a blow to the Cajun, Rogue quickly intercepted him mid-strike. and started to go toe-to-toe with the massive man as Gambit struggled to figure out the controls. So with the device deactivated, the power broker rushed the two in an attempt to end the fight, but Lady Deathstroke jumped in just in time to take the device off his chest, which depowered him in the process and turned him back to his original form. So with the chips deactivated, the remaining prisoners exited the facility and surrounded the powerless broker. So with the battle over, we skip one day later with Rogue at the X-Men treehouse. And when we get there, we see Rogue talking to Destiny about how she is betraying Gambit and mutantkind in order to protect them. But Destiny eases her guilt by saying war is coming, and the uncomfortable truth is that they do what they must in order to survive. Because Rogue used the power broker's device to force Manifold to come with her to carry out Destiny's plans. And because of this betrayal, Rogue wonders if the rest of her friends will forgive her for doing this. In which Destiny responds by saying that she can't promise forgiveness, but she can promise that they will survive. But see, to make things worse, Rogue brings up how the Black Panther won't give up on looking for his missing friend, which I hope brings up a story arc with Wakanda being against Krakoa somewhere down the line. Now, on a side note, Wakanda is one of the 3 nations I would like to see Krakoa go up against. Now the other 2 nations are A, the underwater nation of Atlantis with Namor, and B, Black Bolt with the Inhumans. But anyway, getting back to the story, Destiny tells Rogue that she is thinking too small, because the Black Panther could keep looking, Manifold could get angry, and Gambit could get his feelings hurt, but mutantkind will live. So with that out there, Destiny brings a capsule out of the water to store Manifold in, for when they need him. So as Rogue hands over the controller, she asks Destiny if he will be okay inside. Which she replies with he is safer in there than anywhere else, because ultimately it's either Manifold in the capsule or all of us, including him in a grave. So with that out there, Rogue tells Destiny that she has more in common with Gambit than she thinks, because neither of them shies away from dramatics and will do anything you must for what you believe in, which is why she loves them both and is trusting her now. So following this interaction, we see Gambit making his way to their apartment after a little run, and when he gets there he sees Rogue burning the food. But following that, his love asks him if he could remove the device on her neck, the same device that could quote-unquote kill her despite being able to be brought back. But anyway, Forge stated a localized charge could cancel the effects of the broker's implants if done correctly. So with Rogue putting complete trust in Gambit, he then proceeds in pulling off the device and putting an end to this mini-story. So with that said, issue number 5 of Rogue and Gambit comes to an end. Now when it comes to this comic run, it served its purpose in storing Manifold away for the fall of the House of X issue number 2, which I have to admit was a great issue. But when it comes to this storyline as a whole, I feel like it could have done more with the Black Panther, because in this comic he was greatly underutilized, especially because they made a big deal of him showing up in issue number 2. Now, I completely understand that this is supposed to be Rogue's and Gambit's solo story, but we all know that the Black Panther wouldn't have given up that easily, especially with one of his friends in trouble. So because of that, I feel like they missed out on an opportunity for some great storytelling and a potential story arc that could have concluded in an alliance with Wakanda. And as for the villain to oversee this arc, the Power Broker wouldn't have been my first pick, but could have still played great into the themes I thought this storyline was going with. But anyway, down in the comment section below, let me know your thoughts about this complete story and what you as the reader would have loved to see happen in this mini-series. So with that established, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please don't forget to leave a like and a comment if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.